Hello, folks, and welcome to this new edition of Irrespective. We are going to mention a few things which are sacred cows for a lot of Christians, but nevertheless, one of our taglines is Christians challenging conventional Christianity. And the title for today's episode is Christianity, the Free Market, and Modern Capitalism. The audience would have noted that we have placed capitalism in quotation marks because, as with all these things, there is the popular culture presentation, which is very reductionist and shallow. And then there is the better, more in depth, proper understanding of these things. Whenever there are certain, let's say, comments or speeches or books written or even popular presentation, whether it be through mainstream media, social media in the modern age of these things, again, everything is given in bite-sized chunks. It's not actually meant to give a proper perspective, a proper understanding on what these things entail, good and bad. And therefore, once again, the reasoning for underlining capitalism and putting quotation marks in it, because I have a feeling that there are those whom would say of the title without watching the episode that we are Bernie Bros suddenly, even though our history is one of denouncing over and over again socialism, communism, Marxism, Leninism, its different iterations. We have vehemently been against these very systems. But now, when the conventional concepts that are even popular amongst conservative Christians get challenged because they are inconsistent with certain biblical principles, without listening to the evidence, some people will automatically default to that means that you are an enemy suddenly. I would encourage the audience to give us a few minutes of your time so as to properly give forth our views on the matter, and then you can determine on your own, again, irrespective of any other coloring of the matter, if we are in fact communists or if we are approaching this from a biblical and level-headed perspective on the matter. Once again, for those of you that might be joining us for the first time on Irrespective, my name is Gio. Joining me as always, and I him, my father, Jesus.
So let me be very blunt about this. Good morning. That's not the blunt part. I hate communism. We had to flee. And thankfully, this country opened its doors to us because communism was destroying us like it has destroyed people throughout history, any time, anywhere that it's been implemented. So I hate communism. But the point that Gio is making is a valid one. It's like us presenting a topic that challenges if we are a democracy. And all of a sudden we have to clarify something that was, I think, very clear to the founding people in those early stages of American life. We were formed, we were shaped to be a republic. But if you take this topic up, people all of a sudden, once again, they'll go, I think these two like socialism or they like communism. Once again, bluntly, I hate communism and I will fight it every day of my life.
Yes.
And here's the other challenge that we as Christians have. Why are you tackling this? It's Sunday. You should be talking about the 23rd Psalm. Take a look at the title of the program, and you will find that we are tackling this because it needs to be dealt with. After all, even a verse that has been a staple in Christian thought, which is the love of money is the root of all evil, now when you read the modern versions, is one of the roots of all evil. So you either have one root system to something that is evil, or you have many, and I believe the Bible points to one root system that, as you see it through the human prism or our position in life, it seems to control just about everything. So we feel comfortable in tackling this issue, and we hope that it'll bless you and it will instruct you in some cases, edify you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let me take a couple of minutes, just a couple of quick minutes to invite you for the edition, the Wednesday 23rd edition, where we will be tackling the following subject. And you might laugh and you might think this is not happening. It is. Christians, Pentecostals, evangelicals using AI to interpret their tongues. Glossolalia, I believe, if my memory banks don't fail me, is the name of the Greek word. Speaking in tongues is popular amongst Pentecostals, and now they're using AI to interpret their prayer language, tongues. So you don't want to miss next Wednesday, the 23rd, the latest edition, what will be the latest edition of Irrefutable.
Now, let me establish a proper baseline for an understanding of all of these terms, because you were just mentioning earlier, and I think it's important for us to rehash this. Words are important.
Yes.
The type of words that one uses also are important. The Bible tells us that we have to be very careful with our speech. And Jesus himself says that for every lazy word that we utter, we will have to give an account for it. Evidently,
you will be accountable, yes.
These terms then, these verses, they very, they let us know the importance then of speech, being truthful, among other things. This is why we've taken issue throughout the years, and we will continue to take issue with commentators whose only interest is ginning up attention so they can monetize it. We're not interested in ginning up attention to monetize it. We're interested in getting the truth out. This is why so many people have taken throughout the years issues with what we have to say, because we will go to places where, including many believers, they don't want that aspect touched because it's an inconvenient thing to say. It's an untouched aspect of their existence that it's almost as if they're outright refusing that the scriptures were to have an extent to those things. But nevertheless, Christ tells us to be truthful at all moments. Having said that, we see then that, as I'll give an example, Tucker Carlson loves to use the phrase, we are a representative democracy. You just mentioned this earlier. We're not supposed to be, where we're not designed to be a representative democracy. This is what this country has devolved into. If you read the founders' writings about democracies, to a man, they hated it because they were men who knew, they were proper statesmen. They knew about history, and they knew what eventually happens to democracies. They end up dying out because of what Jefferson calls the tyranny of the 51%, or the tyranny of the majority, and other aspects of it.
It's actually used to move power away from the people, those with a real vested interest in having the welfare of the country stay intact. It moves the power away from them into special groups that, on many occasions, if not to say most, it's a small group that takes control of everything.
Exactly. Now, as we're talking about being careful with terms, there's an intentionality here that cannot be dismissed. Why? And he has been corrected on this, and he's a very popular figure. That's why I use him as an example. Why, if he knows that we were designed to be a representative democracy, or I'm sorry, a representative constitutional republic, why is it that he continues to peddle the idea that we are a representative democracy? This is why, just to use an example, that words are important. You have to use the proper terms, because let's face it, most people are not out there. They're working 8, 9, 10-hour jobs. They're just trying to bring a paycheck home. They're trying to support their families. And they're not going to take the time to read these things, as it were, when they get home, or to do in-depth studies on these matters. So they take it from whatever these popular figures are telling them, and they'll say, it's that because this person said so. This is one of the reasons that for years, you and I have been saying, don't take what we have to say for granted. Go and research it yourself. Do the Berean thing, as we have talked about before. Search the scriptures, search the source documentation that we're quoting, et cetera, to see if we're truthful or not. Don't take it based on us. Take it based on what the truth will say. Having said that, then we move on to the subject then of this edition, which is, I find it interesting that most people, especially Christians, will defend capitalism. I'm going to use that in air quotes, capitalism as an infallible thing. It's almost godlike, the system itself that we have to defend. I know,
in contrast to defending the free market.
There's a big difference. This is why we're saying that there are importance in the distinctions. Well, Gio, my understanding is, I know what some of you are thinking. My understanding is that capitalism and free market are one and the same thing. Furthermore, being that we're talking to Christians primarily here, my understanding is that the founders, the system, the economic system they established in this country was pulled out of the Old Testament. And this is why what we defend it. There are a lot of empty spaces in your knowledge, a lot of gaps that need to be informed. Number one, when we're talking about the free market is essentially free from government interference. It's people leaving the method and the exchange itself free to do it amongst each other or amongst larger groups. We don't have that in this country. It doesn't matter what Trump, it doesn't matter what the Republicans, it doesn't matter what anybody says. We don't have a true free market, which is what Adam Smith, the people who know a thing or two about economics, will tell you. The seminal book on the free market was written by Adam Smith. When you read what Adam Smith, and I've read what Adam Smith writes in that book about economics, you'll note that he doesn't talk about, as it were, necessarily government control as being the free market over the exchange method and the exchange or the exchanges themselves. What we actually have in this country is more socialism than anything else. But what is it that the commentators, the politicians, and others will preach about? We have to defend free economics as we have here in the United States, when in fact, that's not what we have. So therefore, many Christians are actually defending a system which is inherently more socialist. And I know you'll give a few examples, and I will too, shortly, that actually prove that this is more of a socialist system than a free market. And we're actually defending something that in many cases, and I'll give some examples shortly also, is actually more immoral. It runs afoul of biblical principles. One last point before you take your portion here. Most people don't know that the term capitalism was actually a pejorative term invented by Karl Marx to deride the free market. But you hear a lot of conservative commentators and Christians say we need to defend capitalism, when in fact it was invented, again, look it up, by Marx, to be a pejorative term to try to denounce and to defame the free market.
So faulty ideas, faulty premises, and even principles, they dare call them, enter into the mainstream of American life. And sure enough, it gets into the church, and next thing you know, Christians are using the same terms and believing the same things. Through licensing and regulation, the government takes absolute control of everything. Most churches are unaware that this country, for the longest time, the federal government has had its eye on the church. How can we control the church? It's the same thing with the Second Amendment. How can we still have the Second Amendment in print and yet make it meaningless? Give nothing really to the people that the Second Amendment gives to the people. Well, in the case of the churches, and now we bring it back to believers, you have Christians saying we need licensing and regulations, because once you get the license, you have to have the regulations. And so this is the way the government creeps in, it kind of slowly, with the idea that says more or less, this is for your own good, so people will not take you for a ride, they won't take you for fools. We are just protecting you. All of a sudden, something that should be in your hands is no longer in your hands, it's in the hands of the government. And now you have churches with the obligation to report, with the obligation to fill this, do that. And we are not really under the exclusive scrutiny of God. Now it's the ever looking into issues government, all the time looking into our affairs. Of course, you're gonna have Christians to say, yeah, but if we don't do that, then evil preachers will dupe us. Well, then do your due diligence and make sure that evil preachers don't dupe you. Furthermore, denounce them, which is something that today you're not supposed to do because you're dividing the body of Christ. Denounce them, and then they will not be duping people.
Yep.
I see. So I recall a few years ago when the idea started brewing around South Florida about getting ministers a license, a state and federal license later on, so that we could be properly identified and protected. And I remember talking to a few pastors and telling them, can't you see what is at play here? No, what are you talking about? I think it'll be good. That way we can protect ourselves and, be closer as part of the local body and part of the body of Christ that we are, etc. And so once we have that, it'll be fantastic. I said, after licensing comes the regulations, and God knows what they will think of next. Remember during COVID, we had to fight the idea of Man bathrooms are for men and the ladies' bathroom are for ladies. We
Yep.
had to fight that one, folks. And you will see more and more of these things if you get a license and the regulation. You have to marry the homosexuals because it's an equal rights thing. And so I think once we start looking at this from the biblical perspective, it's not really difficult to understand why we would prefer going completely back to the free market idea and not the thing that has been sold to us as something fantastic when in reality it has taken just about everything from our hands and put it under the banner. They won't say it this way, but that's what it is, under the control of socialism.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that cuts, as it were, at the very heart of the thing. Instead of arguing on the margins of this thing, let's get to the heart of the thing. Most people have been led to believe by government itself that it's important that these bureaucracies exist for their own protection. But if you think about it, folks, inherently what that does is that puts the vigilance that we should have on government and the distrust that we should have in government, because they are men and women fallen just like we are. It takes it away from the citizenry and puts the control in the hands of persons whom are in power in the first place for nefarious purposes. Being Christians, one would think that Christians would learn this lesson, especially from the Bible. Think about it. Who was Christ crucified by? Well, the Jews. No, no, no. Let's be a bit more specific. I understand the theological, but let's look at the macro level there. Who was he crucified? Wasn't it by government officials? Paul used to be Saul of Tarsus, Paul. Who was he persecuted by? Wasn't it necessarily government officials? When we look at the history of Rome and the early Christian martyrs, who were they being persecuted
And
by?
who turned them over to the government officials?
Exactly.
The religious crowd.
Exactly.
The God's people, if you will, crowd.
Exactly. So you look at these things. See, now we're breaking away from the traditional Sunday sermon on these things, where even government, it's funny, even government dictates to churches what they can and cannot say from the pulpits, and Christians find they don't find that troubling. When the church is supposed to be the pillar and ground of truth, these things are not supposed to be off limits, but under the auspices of churches should not get involved. They ought not get involved in these matters. Why not? If the light of the gospel extends to absolutely everything as we continue to affirm, that why suddenly pull away from these important considerations on how to think and behave Christianly in every aspect of existence? Think about this. If these bureaucracies, government intervention on these things is good for the average person because of protection, why is it that monopolies only grow more and more powerful and small businesses, thriving family businesses, are shut down, effectively moving, as it were, if you think about it, money from one aspect or a smaller aspect to the oligarchs that we have in this country? Just to give an example. Another example, fractional reserve banking. Some will ask, what is fractional reserve banking? Do you know that the government allows all banks under Federal Reserve regulation and laws to lend money that they don't have? Oh, I didn't know that existed. That's how banks continue to get richer. Why? Because the government that says to them, if you give all bad loans, not to worry. We're going to cover, as it were, the defaults and whatnot by paying. Wait a minute, Gio, but doesn't that necessarily mean then that taxpayers, because that's not government money, that's taxpayer money that is put on the hook to make those loans, those insolvent loans, right? Absolutely right. I still remember when Bush said, we have to bail out the auto industry. We have to bail out the auto industry. Curious, you know how many businesses, small businesses, went out because of government regulation, because of the shutdowns during COVID? Do you know how many family businesses went down? Where was their bailout? Couldn't care less about those people. We care about the big businesses in this country. Folks, that's essentially immoral. That begins to prove to you, I hope, that this so-called capitalist system that we have right now in the United States, in many instances, is actually based on immorality, away from Christian ethics. Why would we defend that?
So let's say that you have, I don't know, $100,000 in the bank, $200,000 in the bank, and you decide, I want to buy some gold. I want to hedge. I want to protect my money. On your way to the bank, you hear news that if you buy gold with your credit card, with a check, the government is going to know that you own gold. And what's the big problem? Did you know that the government, the US government, on a previous occasion has told people you have to give up your gold? So once you hear that, you go, I think I'll buy a cash. That way the government doesn't know that I own gold and they won't come after me.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Now you approach the teller and you tell the teller, dear Miss or Mrs. Teller, I would like 20,000 of my dollars in cash. We don't have that amount here. You have to place an order.
Which already should make you suspicious. Why don't you have that money here?
So that you can come pick up your money in 2 or 3 days. And by the way, could we know why you want $20,000 in cash? Of course, they don't make it sound that way because I've been through this before. Are you sure you haven't been scammed? Has somebody been kidnapped? Is there an issue that we can help you with? This is in confidence. I am your banker. And they'll move you over into a private office and have somebody in the hierarchy of the bank talk to you. You mean you've gone through this? Yes. Are you sure? So you have to tell them, listen, I want my money now. And I know you have it there because I know people in the banking industry and I know they have it there. They don't have all that they should because Gio just explained it. They should have all of our money there, but no, they only keep a fraction because they make boatloads of dollars by lending your money, my money. And so the headache that you create for yourself because you want to buy gold and you want to buy it in cash so that the government doesn't know that you own it just in case they decide they want to give you paper dollars for your gold.
It's absolutely worthless.
It becomes an issue for you because now they don't want to give it to you immediately. And then even when they do, they probably report you.
You're suddenly a criminal.
These are the things that are going on that you wonder then, why are these two tackling these issues? Because we as Christians, as believers ourselves, we look for Christian programming that tackles these issues and we cannot find it. Well, that's because Christians don't need to tackle these issues. The secular people tackle these issues, and that's fine. No, it's not fine, because if you are going to use that argument, then I'm going to say, go ahead and follow their sex ideas, their marriage ideas, and all the other ideas. So don't give me that baloney that the secular people are tackling this, and that's fine when you know that we don't live according to secular views or secular principles. We live according to biblical standards. And what we're teaching you here, even though you may think this doesn't sound like a Sunday school class, it doesn't really sound like a Christian service topic. You know, this is just not biblical for a Sunday. It is biblical because we are instructing you as to what is being done to you and what you should do to avoid the control that they have over you.
Even that should make Christians wonder, why is it that for much of modern history, the teachings coming from the pulpit are mostly esoteric? What do I mean by esoteric? There are these concepts out there in the ether that they're beautiful to behold and beautiful to learn, but they have no practical application. Do you actually believe that that is what God's word does? It's simply suspended out there somewhere in the cosmos to not have any application? My understanding is that when Jesus gives these lessons, it's so that we can practically apply them, not leave them out there and makes ourselves believe that somehow we're better Christians just by learning the verses or memorizing these passages, but having no extension, having no practical purpose in our daily living. It's absolutely nonsensical. But that is even the trap that many churches have sold Christians a bill of good on this. Let me quote a text here, 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is the root of all evil. And I am using the King James Version because in the original Greek, I know they've tried to soften the language by saying all kinds of evil. When you get into it, and perhaps we'll get into it in a future episode, when you think about it, you're thinking, yeah, Paul was right. There is a reasoning, as it were, that the greed, as it were, the avarice sets in because it gives you access to many other, as it were, aspects to be able to sin.
So if you have a tree called evil, you mean to tell me that single tree, that one tree has many different root systems? One that looks like the palm tree and
Right.
another one that looks like a pine tree. It's just got a lot of different systems or root systems to one tree. Every tree has its own
well
root
said.
system.
It's well
Evil
said.
has a root system. What is it? According to how humans see it, this is how Paul is explaining it. Money, the love of money, let's be very precise, is the root of all evil.
Listen to the rest of it. It's well explained. While which some coveted after, They have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Let me ask you all a question, and I'll put a bow tie on all of this so that we can continue. We have something else for our audience having to do with Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, telling his wife, air quotations, also known as Big Mike, that it's important that every single man have a gay man in their life because fathers aren't enough. You need other men to speak into those men's life about having different perspectives. We're about to cover that.
If you
shortly.
notice, perhaps we might not have time, Gio, and we'll leave it for next Sunday because this topic is very important, and we've already promised the audience what we're going to be tackling on Wednesday. But it's important as you listen to the interview to pick up on the fact that he's almost prognosticating, he's almost prophesying that in the future you're going to have gay boys in your life, and that you have to prepare yourself so that you can help your gay child in his gayness. And he also intimates into that as they go through schools and schooling, they will need other people so that they can help correct dads in the upbringing of their kids. This is going to be a really interesting topic, and I don't want to chop it up into a 5-minute situation where we say a few things, but we don't really complete the topic. And so it's something that I would advise that you give us a few minutes of your time and pay attention to it, because it's almost like we've been saying throughout the years, pay attention to what is going on in the school system, what's going on in film and music, because it's obvious that they're driving your kids towards a certain mentality. And now here comes the ex-president. And by the way, did you notice they were using really big mics?
Yes.
In the
both types.
Big mic.
Both types. Right.
Yeah, they had
the microphones.
they had the big mic in the interview. But anyway,
the humankind and the microphones.
It's obvious, folks, that they know that behind the scenes, the push to turn your kids into gay kids is happening. And so now the preparation, if you will, is to get moms and dads on board with the gayness that they are inculcating in their kids. I've been talking about this for 35 years. I have audio recordings from pulpit sermons where I was telling the congregation, they will turn your kids against you. And then once you figure, well, I have a gay child, I have to love him and embrace him. And if I'm going to love him and embrace him, I might as well love and embrace his homosexuality. Love your homosexual child to the point that you help him come out of that, not stay in that. Get that straight in your mind. Otherwise, you will love him to hell. So, yes, continue to love your child to the point and whatever it takes to bring him out of that, not to keep him in that.
A couple of other things, folks, just to talk about how Christians ought not defend things that are, by their very nature, not only corrupted, but against biblical principles. A lot of our modern economy is based on deception. Think about the amount of deception that is used to get you to sell you on things that you don't necessarily need and are actually detrimental to you. I'll give you an example. How much so-called food, and that is something that probably deserves an episode on its own, because a lot of what is considered today food actually isn't food. There's a reason why there was a coalition built during the last election to try to make America healthy again. Why would the government, if it is supposedly protecting people, allowing so-called food companies to manipulate the food supply to the point where it's actually making people sick, leading them to death? And on the other aspect, they engineer those foodstuffs, as they are known in the industry, to make it more addictive so people can continue to buy the same product that's killing them over and over again. What moral nation allows that to happen? Some people would say, Gio, but that's necessarily a contradiction. That's not necessarily a free market. We're talking about something that now goes out of economics into national security, into the well-being of people.
So how come the farmers are always complaining that they're being driven out of the market if we have a free market?
Exactly.
So you have to bring it back.
Exactly.
Again, my fellow brother and sister in Christ, stop listening so much to people that don't have your best interest as a Christian in mind, and continue to find the information and education that you need in Christian voices. Otherwise, you will be led astray into these voices that do not have your best interest in mind.
Here's another example I have for the audience, and Trump is pushing this. by the way, and you hear the contradiction and you ask yourself, don't people notice it? We need to be a leader in artificial intelligence. When you listen to those whom are putting forth trying to peddle artificial intelligence, whether it be Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Bill Ackman, or all these other tech investors, you hear them saying, we know that this technology is going to put millions of people out of work, so it'd best be if we put something like a universal basic income or whatnot. To me, it's immoral when a company says, what is it that we're making on the bottom line? Even if we just shave 0.5%, it doesn't matter how many people we put out of business. It doesn't matter how many people, as it were, we put out of a job, even though they need that to subsist. It's best if we put them on government employment, because we're going to continue to become oligarchical and monopolistic, and we're going to enrich our coffers, as it were, while the little people, as it were, they continue to die off, and they continue. That's essentially immoral. Why would you go down a path, as it were, where you're looking at a situation where it's probably a mass starvation event in the name of, we just need to be technologically advanced? Folks, these are things that when your typical Christian defends, I'm a defender of capitalism, you have to ask, wait a minute, what do you mean by capitalism? Because if you're talking about the modern system of economics, which in fact is more socialist, as we have proven on this edition, more than anything else, why would you defend that as inherently a free market when it's not? That's why I go back to what I said earlier. Our terms, the usage of terms, are important. Otherwise, we get duped into defending things which are actually detrimental to us and run afoul of biblical, of Christian principles.
And again, they'll keep certain words until they're ready to move on. We've talked about this before. Liberal used to mean that you were generous. What does it mean now? And so some people will say free market. In reality, they'll keep the words for however long they need to, but behind the scenes, they're working the whole socialist, communist idea. Just take a look at what's happening in New York City. They're getting ready to install a communist. And you're going to go, well, it doesn't bother me because that's New York. It bothers all of us because this is one nation, and we get to bail them out all the time, like we get to bail out. Who is we? The taxpayers, like we get to bail out California. And then we Christians are stuck right in the middle of all of this. And it seems like we have nothing to say. We never have a complaint. We just get along and we move along. And hopefully one of these days, Christ will return and he will say, that was a great job you guys did as the light of the world and the salt of the earth. You saltless, dark.
You're more like pepper in that instance.
And so I'm used to shedding people. And it all started when Obama was about to get elected president. I told people, this guy is going to bring up abortions. He is going to move the homosexual agenda.
He did.
And lo and behold, why? He was going right after Clinton, who had started that whole thing, and he was handpicked, he was cherry-picked to make sure that he did all of this. There's a community of homosexuals that decided that Obama was their biggest ally, and they awarded him for that. So maybe on Wednesday, Gio, we'll tackle the AI interpreting tongues plus Obama.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think?
Might as well.
Okay.
That is what we're going to do on Wednesday, folks. We had some other things for the audience, because for me, for us, it's not enough to simply say this is the problem, because let's face it, you're building a bridge going from one place but not building the other half. Biblically, you show the problem, but you also show a solution. I don't want to leave the audience hanging, because there are those who would ask, I understand, so what do I do? I'm not going to do disservice to the topic by in 30 seconds telling you this is what we're going to do. In a future edition, and not in the not too distant future, I'd like to take this up to talk about how we can begin to build, as it were, what Andrew Tober, the founder of Gab, says, parallel economies, to mirror as it was in this country at the beginning. And it's possible, and people are doing it. The thing is, we have to break out of the mindset that U.S. corporations have begun to box us into, where we think we have to go to them because they absolutely have everything that we need and want. If you think a little bit differently, you'll begin to actually contribute to the very thing that would undermine this system that, as we have stated on this edition, cannot be defended with Christian ethics. But conversely, if you change the attitude, if you change your approach to this, it'll actually be more akin to what the Bible, as it were, tells us to be with respect to being salt and light in economic transactions. So we'll definitely bring that up in a future episode.
Even in Southwest Florida, we've seen a couple of businesses that will give you a better price if you pay cash.
Yep.
Why is this important? Why should I, as a great Christian that I am, be interested in this? Because you are the type of people that are always wanting to know, is the 666 anywhere close by? How close is 666? Is that the Antichrist out there somewhere in Europe? This is why all these things are important, except we're explaining it to you with a behind-the-scenes look as to how they push these agendas and issues so as to bring on 666. And you're going like, this is not a Sunday topic. Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. All these things are Sunday topics, Wednesday topics, Monday topics. Anyways, as we conclude, do not forget, if you're on YouTube and on Rumble, to subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, you have to click on the notification bell to be alerted as to when we are doing these new live streams, and also with respect to all the other clips that we're posting on there. We would also encourage you to share our content, folks. Please share our content. It helps us to grow, as it were, the channels on both YouTube and on Rumble. By the way, we are also streaming on X. If you have not followed us yet on X, the account is at Irrespective77. Please give us a follow. We are also live streaming there. Thank you to the people who left us comments today on Rumble and on YouTube. And lastly, do not forget your patronage. It helps us to continue to put out this content for your edification. We're not going to apologize to the so-called purists, as it were, on this, because they want, we're going to go to Genesis, and we're going to go to chapter 1, and we're going to go verse by verse on the matter. If you want practical application of Christian thought, of Christian behavior, of Christian principles, on Christian ethics, this is where you're going to get it, and we're going to delve into these topics. If you want the typical Sunday speech, 45 minutes, so you can feel as if you did your duty to God, this is not the place to be. But if you want practical application of Christian principles as applied to the daily world, as applied to daily living, you've come to the right place. Please subscribe if you have not yet done so, and share our content with others. Irrespective.
Well said.
Next stream on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same bat channel, same bat time as usual on Wednesdays. For Jesus, this has been Gio. Until the next occasion that we gather.
By bat, we mean better at this.
Correct. Until the next occasion that we gather, may the Lord shine his face upon you.